everyone, and yeah, thank you so much for coming tonight. It's really great to see so many of you here. I'm Ellie. I work in the product and agile delivery function here at Sheehan, and yeah, really excited to be kicking off tonight. Just to give a bit of context at Sheehan, apart from just recruitment, we really do try and embed ourselves in the product community, and yeah, host sort of like regular tech talks, events, blogs, this one in particular is super exciting. We've not had a in-person product meetup in quite a while, so yeah, we went out to our community, talked to them about what they wanted to hear about, and one thing that came up quite regularly was scalability and the risks and challenges around that. So yeah, we've set up a fantastic panel tonight. We've got Magda from Tide, Nima from Liberis, Jess from Dojo, who will be moderating tonight, Vanessa from Monzo, and Elina from Shares. And I'm sure they'll introduce themselves shortly. For questions, we have a QR code just on there, so you can scan that and ask questions throughout. But yeah, we'll be answering them at the end. On that, we do also have a poll. So yeah, it'd be great to hear any feedback for future events so that we can keep providing kind of insightful events for you. We've also booked out a space at the White Horse afterwards, so if you want to carry on the conversation over a drink, it'd be great to see you all there. Also, just a massive thanks to Tide and also you, Magda, for helping us put together such an amazing event and letting us use this lovely office space. Toilet-wise, I'm sure you probably do know now, but out the door to left to the right, down to the right for disabled toilets, and Grace and Ross will let you in. But I'll pass over to Jess to kick off tonight.
Hi guys, first of all thank you everyone for being here tonight. It's great to see so many people here. I am going to be the moderator for this panel this evening, and for those of you who don't know me, brief intro into me. I've been in product for the last 10 years or so. I've worked on various scaling products throughout my career, one being Octopus Cash, and then moving on to Spec at Pupil, and most recently at Dojo. So there's a loose agenda for tonight, and we're going to include questions around MVPs, how to grow them, and some funding questions at the end if we get time. And as we mentioned, don't forget to add any questions to the Slido, code behind, and we'll make sure there's plenty of time for those at the end. So I will hand over to Magda to kind of start everyone introducing themselves in the panel.
On? Yes, it is. Hi guys, thank you so much for coming. My name is Magda and I am Polish. And I mention this because also my career started for product, working for a small startup called Gumtree that was later just bought by eBay. So I have actually various experience. But I am with Tide for over a year. It's super fun here. You can see we have nice office. But with FinTech, I am just around 5-6 years, and I've been actually also working through whole my career for different scaling companies. So I've been there from like those little startups when you literally have an empty website to those massive corporations. So hopefully just we're gonna learn something from each other today and have great discussion. Thank you.
Hello everyone, great to seeing you all. My name is Nima, I'm Chief Product Officer for Liberis. My background is in software engineering, that's where I started, and then moved to a consultancy. My biggest contribution to the world of engineering is stop writing code, not introducing more bugs, leaving it to other people. And in my consulting days at ThoughtWorks, I worked for many different companies across Europe, helping them to become product-led, move to transform to be more agile. And then later on, I joined Babylon Health, where I was very fortunate to run the product team. We scaled the team from around 200 people to, when I left 8 weeks ago, around 3,000 people, took the company public, raised over $1 billion in the process. And then very new to FinTech, 9 weeks ago, I joined Liberis. It's been an exciting journey, learning still about the intricacies of world of FinTech, and really looking forward to tonight's conversation. And thanks for hosting us.
Hey everyone, I'm Vanessa. I'm a PM at Monzo. Previous to that, I was in telecoms, so this is actually my first time in FinTech. At Monzo, actually, I work in financial crime, so one of the goals for us is to reduce fraud, and we do that in a variety of ways. looking at sort of leveraging machine learning solutions and fighting fraud.
Hi everyone, my name is Elina. Just like a few other people on this panel, I have worked in a range of companies starting from very small startups up to 3,000 people. I'm one of those PMs that doesn't like to work on the same product twice, so I have done things like investing, digital receipts, developer experience, analytics. So I hope to share some of those insights and learnings with you tonight. Thank you.
Okay, so let's jump into our questions. With the first chunk will be all around MVPs, so your minimum viable product, as we like to say. So first question then, I'm going to hand this to Nima. So how do you pitch an MVP and get buy-in from your stakeholders, but also take them along on that journey at the same time as well?
So yeah, you kind of alluded to the answer. It's like taking them on a journey. So from my experience, when you fail to convince your stakeholders is usually when you focus on that first thin slice, and then they cannot see beyond that first slice. I would start with the goal, with the journey, making sure that they understand all the stops to the journey, and trying to convince them that going through the journey through many stops is going to be more beneficial for them as well. They can give more and more feedback. They can have a part in developing that journey, rather than just sitting at the receiving end and waiting for that. So yeah, the key thing is take them on a journey and make sure that they understand that MVP is the first stop on the journey rather than the final goal that you're trying to achieve.
Do you guys have OKRs? And your company does it, or they don't? Who does it? So only those people are in a very privileged situation, because you can go and say, hey, when I'm going to build this, it's going to meet those OKRs. I'm going to hit the targets, right? We're going to have the goal, and we're going to just actually do whatever the strategy is there. But if you don't, then I actually just would like to encourage you to go to your management and say, hey, what are the OKRs? How can then you build something otherwise, right? For you, how do you make this decision? So of course, data is always good. User research. How many of you do the user research? Why only so many people? I mean, only this amount, right? This is a must-have these days for product people. You can always go out and search for things and just say, you know what, I've done this, and it's going to improve this and by this. So data always, because always stakeholders love the data. So this was my comment to what Nima said, actually. Not sure if other people want to say.
Yeah, do you guys have Ellie? Let's go.
Yeah, I can share a practical tip of what we do with my current company, Shares. So what we do is basically we have cross-functional working groups. So whenever we start a new significant product that we want to work on, we involve all the people along the way. And involve, I don't mean get them in a room and tell them what you're doing. Involve, I mean get them contributing, listen to their ideas, take some of the ideas forward so that they're a part of the journey, starting from the first step. Because nobody likes to be told what to do. People like to be listened to, and people also like to be taken on board. So I guess that would be my best advice. Get people not just listening, but also get them involved and get them to contribute in the way. Because that way they will be brought in every single step of the way.
So Elina, do you mean then if you're having a design workshop, for example, or a validation workshop, or some user research, would you say then bring your execs along, bring your stakeholders along to those kind of appointments?
Yes. When you're doing brainstorming sessions about how you can reach certain objectives with your solution, get everybody on board, get some execs in the room, get design, get engineering so that people could bring their own ideas. I mean, like groups always generate better ideas than you yourself in the room. And the same goes with user research, actually. What we also do is basically have listening sessions where we pre-record user research, and then we basically play it back with whoever wants to come and join and listen in. You take notes along the way, you put down any kind of insights, and you basically, at the end of the session, everybody who has been in the room has taken a walk in the customer's shoes. So again, it benefits everybody, and the next time you might have to say no to your stakeholder, they might have a better understanding of why you're saying no.
Yeah, that makes total sense.
So I was actually going to add to it, but also maybe challenge some of that. I mean, I definitely agree. There's a lot of merit in like ideation sessions, bringing on board the right stakeholders. There's also then that risk, though, you get too many cooks in the room. And I think it's an interesting one because as, I guess, a product function, your main goal is to drive that strategic direction forward. And you're always going to get someone's opinion that is going to slightly differ from someone else's. And so how do you make that right decision to drive that forward? And I think that's where the influence and sort of, like you said, bring people on board and bring them in early comes into play. Something I think most people might have read the book already, which is Dale Carnegie's, How to Influence People, which is talk in someone else's interests. And I think that's a really valid point here because what you're really doing is you're trying to say, I've already solved the problem you want me to solve by doing this, and you're sort of already getting their buy-in by showing them what is their problem and what is the solution. So yes, absolutely bring people in, but I think there is sort of that caution that, you don't want to end up sort of having everyone needing to have a word and then sort of finding no direction.
Absolutely. I think, because everyone's the most important one in the room, right? And everyone wants what they want right now, yesterday. I remember once an old manager of mine said to me, as a PM, you're kind of like a juggler. You're like juggling different kind of characteristics, if you will, in order to influence different people within the business. You talk differently to your engineers than you would to your main exec, for example. So yeah, I think, like you said there, speaking to people's interests is really important. Does anyone have any kind of final tips on how you can help your stakeholders get on that journey with you? Because I know we spoke about that, but what if they're just not listening to you and they're just not on board? How can you, apart from the workshops, how could you bring them in?
Yeah, I can talk about a story from my days in consulting when I was working for Economists, so an organization very well respected. I was reading Economists well before I started working for them as a consultant. And it's an organization with a perfection mindset. That's okay, it's a print organization. Every Wednesday they get in a room, they read the newspaper, as they call it. It's not a magazine if you say it's a magazine. They kill you there. And then they send it for print. And it needs to be perfect. If it is 12:05 and you find a mistake, you cannot change it. So that's the mindset of organization. And we went there to help them with the migration project. And we realized the biggest issue is that each time they tried to do it, they wanted to do a big bang. And it failed. And we had several hours of conversations with stakeholders who were trying to help us convince the senior managers on releasing an MVP. And at the end, it was a very simple thing that did the trick. So just changing the wording MVP to MVE, minimum viable experiment. So people who were pushing back on putting a product out because it wasn't perfect, all of a sudden they loved the concept of, oh, we are experimenting. So if it is bad, you can roll it back. Yes, that's always software. We can always roll it back. We can always change it. But it was the mindset of organization that they didn't have the iteration assumption like many tech companies. They had the perfection assumption that you cannot put it out. So I think the point here is that it kind of depends on the organization that you are in as well and the type of stakeholders that you have. So you need to frame that message to fit the audience that you have and the organization that you're trying to influence.
Nice. Okay, I think that segues us nice onto our next question, which is, okay, so you've talked about their MVP. We've got them with that, but your stakeholders, they just don't want to launch an MVP. They want the end product. And so how do you kind of mitigate that, and how do you kind of stop them asking for that full solution in that case? Magda, do you want to take this?
Yes. Well, it depends on what stakeholders we talk about. Because I try also not to use much MVP because it's a scary one, and especially I try to understand, and by working with people I know what the kind of a challenge for them is. Most of the stakeholders are scared that when you launch MVP, you will not have time to actually just develop the remaining features or optimize the product. So the roadmap, it's always a good indication for it. If you show them the roadmap, hey, we have this is the iteration number 2, or this is gonna come in that time, right? But we still need to just go and see if it's gonna be working the initial kind of launch. And as I said, I really am very careful when I use MVP because of the bad connotation does it have, and it doesn't have a good quality. And people also, this is another thing. The testing, when you just go and actually try to test things or try to update your stakeholders. Communication is super important. They get panicked, and they also, so it's very important to have those updates, to have demo showing them that this is working, so they kind of get used to the product, even it's not the full version of it, but they can get used to it. And the more you add there, even it's not a super equipped feature or the product, it's still they are kind of happy with it. And it's also important as to present, and I'm gonna stick again to the data. KPIs are very important to see, hey, we believe that, you know, with these features, we can already achieve A or B in the first few months. This is our hypothesis. So it's always good to have that, and I encourage everyone who doesn't do it to actually start thinking about your product that way. But again, just to have the roadmap on this one and clear when the next things are coming. So this is, I think, a calming thing.
Yeah, that communication is key, right? Even if it's bad sometimes.
I was actually going to add, we actually take a slightly different approach at Monzo. And maybe I might ask everyone here, who here thinks or works at an agile company, whatever that means? Hands up, maybe. Cool, yeah, most of us. All right. Now, I want you to all think about a project maybe that you're proud of, or that an average project that you've delivered recently, and maybe lift your hands when, I guess, keep your hands up. So put up your hand if your project took you a year. Cool, no one, that sounds good. Oh, one person? Sorry, I don't want to... Don't look. All right, how about 8 months? Yeah, cool, all right. 6 months, half a year. Cool. Few others, okay. 3 months? Okay, way more, yeah. A month. A few, cool. I would say the majority of the projects we run at Monzo, we have this approach to almost what we call don't fire cannonballs, like fire little pellets. It's a sort of sense of like experimentation, and we look at, for example, running in, and I can't say this for all teams, but at least in our squad, if we worked on something for 6 weeks, that's a lot. And we look at running into like 2 week to 4 week cycles. And a lot of it is, what can you get out in 2 weeks then? What does that look like? What do you need to build to be able to get something out in 2 weeks, and what can you show for that? And I think if you time bound yourself, and there are situations where sometimes it's not always as easy to be time bound, but when you think of it from a time perspective and then work backwards, sometimes you then make up, or you end up in a position where you're making decisions as to where to cut scope.
Yeah, that's really, really interesting. Any more on this one?
And I think it's also important to challenge of what is the purpose of an MVP, and what is a full solution. Your full solution probably is full with assumptions that you can probably validate in a much quicker, cheaper, effective way than actually building. So I think it's also important to challenge your stakeholders about what those assumptions are and how can you work together to validate them quicker. That way, again, you get them involved and you put responsibility on them to help you with some of that process.
I really like what you said, Vanessa, around starting small and kind of having that closed feedback loop and learning really fast, failing fast, and kind of, like you said, not spending 8 months on a project that potentially isn't going to fly, isn't going to work, has loads of bugs, or is now out of scope because things have changed in 8 months. So I think that's a really interesting way to look at it. Okay, so then imagine we're kind of in the throes of our MVP, we've got it past the stakeholders, but now everyone's super interested and everyone's got their own multiple directions that they want this to go in. How do we validate these quickly and kind of do them or don't do them, I guess? Anyone want to go for that one? Nima? Yeah?
So I think it's the point that Elina was making. So experimentation, lean experimentation. So as cheaply as you can, as quickly as you can, and generate the data. And a lot of the time is prototyping. And typically, from my experience, it's very rare or never seen that a bad idea in prototype becomes a good idea in product. So if it's a bad idea when you're prototyping, you're testing, you can usually go back to your stakeholders, convince them that, okay, this one was wrong, but how can we build a pipeline of experimentation that anyone is welcomed to bring an idea, and quickly you can turn it around, you can run a lean experiment, very cheaply, very quickly, produce the data, and if it's a good idea, great. We want everyone to come up with those. If it's not, show them the process that you can get to that answer quickly. I know it's close to your heart.
Yeah, but to be honest, I'm not sure if I can add more because it's exactly how I think and how I would do. So to be honest, this is kind of like self-explanatory for me.
Yeah.
And unless Elina wants to add.
Elina's got something to add.
I think one thing you also need to consider is the risk. So you probably have like 100 assumptions about what you want to do and how you might want to solve a problem, whether it's even a problem. I think it's also very important not to waste your time, but focus on really the riskiest assumptions that will blow the whole thing out if you don't validate them as soon as possible.
Can I actually say something?
Sure. Guys, do you have in your company, and sorry I'm asking because I'm curious, but do you have a role called product analyst? Who has this role? It's a very unusual role. And we got them at tight. And I felt like, oh my God, who is that? This is just someone between product manager, right? I'm looking at Chris, product manager, and the business analyst. Now this person is actually doing this. They analyze the product, they come up with the eventual risk, they have hypothesis, and they say, well, if you now go with this product, this direction, this is going to happen, this hypothesis is actually not working, and if you want the improvement on this one by 30%, you need to do this and that. And this person helped me in life. So I'm wondering, if you cannot afford it, I always encourage people to actually just dive into it, because it was for me a very helpful thing, exactly and about those risks, right? And they are coming there and where to invest later, how to grow my product, how to actually improve my product. SCA, I work in the FinTech and probably lots of people as well. It was a kind of thought, oh my God, it is a must-have, it's a regulatory thing. With the help of this person, I actually can still improve the experience. That's something big.
Yeah, that's awesome. Okay, so we all know then that the reason that we do MVPs is to test, to learn, and inevitably what comes with that is obviously mistakes, learnings. But at what point do you pivot or even abandon your MVP, especially if you're building other products that might help you scale faster? What a question, right?
So,
Nima's got the mic, so take it away.
Ideally, if you're experimenting, you've seen that before, or if you're doing what Magda said around proving your assumptions, testing your riskiest assumptions early on, you should not be in that position. But again, I would look at the signals. I would look at the KPIs. Do I see a road to hitting those signals and KPIs? Have we exhausted all the experiments? If yes, I would move away as quickly as I can to the next high value thing for me.
That makes sense.
So I think I mentioned earlier I work in fraud, and I think fraud's a really good area to tell you where you're failing, because there's someone out there that's probably undoing all the work you're doing, and you'll learn very quickly because you're losing money instead of helping your customers save money. And I think something, and this is a mistake we've made, I guess I've made personally at my time at Monzo, which is this like sunk cost fallacy. Like you spent so much time and you kind of just like, if you made a little bit more of a tweak, it would work. Or if like this little bit, if you patch that gap, that would be like the winning.
One tiny drop down will solve all of our problems.
Exactly.
It'll take 5 days development work, I promise.
I know, and this is like, and actually this happened to me not long ago, I wouldn't say, I can't remember, probably early this year, where we spent 6 weeks, and to my point earlier, where we don't really spend that long on things and we try to get things out quickly, we spent 6 weeks with all the engineers building this one solution to try and patch this one, like what we thought would be like stopping fraud. And in like 3 days, they found a loophole. And it was like, the next thing we thought about was, do we spend a week to patch this, or do we abandon and just move on? And I have to say, it was really tough to abandon. Like we talk about it all the time, like sunk cost fallacy, and like look at your metrics. But in that moment, it's almost emotional. You spent 6 weeks thinking you were going to save the world.
Absolutely. And I think, we always say, we want to fail fast, but failure hurts sometimes.
Yeah.
And you don't want to fail fast. Just don't want to fail.
I know. And I think this is also like the culture you bring, like within the company, like how you talk about failure. Because I think that's also hard to wear. Like, we all like to talk about it like, oh, I'm a hero, I can fail, and I can be brave, it's all about getting up again. But actually, when you are in that moment, it's difficult to swallow and actually, like, admit it. And one of the things I think I really love about Monzo, sorry, I feel like this is a bit of a plug.
Shameless plug.
Shameless plug, come join Monzo, it's great. Is the sense of, like, just owning up to your mistakes, like, hey, I failed. And in fact, I failed at failing the very first time. I know.
Nicely done.
The very first time we ran this experiment, that failed, except I tried to hide it because what happened was 4 people went through this experiment. The third person that went through was like a fraudster and basically showed us we failed. But the 2 people that went through were like genuine customers and they passed fine. And so I said 50% were successful.
Not a bad metric.
Not a bad metric until all your stakeholders start telling you, like, start broadcasting that up the chain, and then they realise it was only 3 people that you're actually talking about.
Yeah, what's the data set behind that?
Yeah.
Don't need to know those
Don't worry
details.
about it, correct. And so I think a lot of it is just, like, what did you set out to achieve? If it's not achieving it, just let it go, move on. There'll be other failures, don't worry.
Yeah, we can guarantee that. That's one thing we can guarantee.
And actually, if you say, this didn't go well, let's move on, this was a mistake, or this was a failure, the more you say it, the more comfortable you get, I think.
Yeah, it sticks well after a while. And I think as long as you learn from it as well, and you can kind of turn around and say, hey, this is what we learned, and we definitely wouldn't do this again, or maybe we would do that again because it showed us X, Y, and Z, or whatever that is. I think that's fine, but there's definitely something personal in it as PMs, definitely.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, I'll turn it into a story in a panel, that works.
I mean, that's what we're here for, right? Yeah, Elina, go for it.
Just to add on a little bit and branch out a little bit as well, I think we as product people have also the responsibility to cultivate a culture of accepting that failing is fine. Within your teams, within your product teams, within your stakeholders and everything else. So I don't think that should be something that is, that should come as a given, because like most times it doesn't. So again, just to branch out a little bit, I think it's very important that there is psychological safety for anybody to feel like failing is okay, and that is a learning opportunity.
Exactly that. I think that learning piece is key, right?
But that depends on the company as well you are.
Yes.
Because if you have,
It depends on the company you're in, because if you have a very, nasty CEO, or the CEO is under pressure from the, all the funding companies, and it's not going well, and, then you failed, but also your CEO failed, your company failed, and I think this is the pressure. And it's hard for people, that's why, to give up. That's why we just sometimes drag the products that really don't perform. Thinking like, yeah, we add this feature, we change it, maybe we just change the layout. Hey, guys, this is new redesign, and you think like, okay.
I think, Magda, as well, to your earlier point around the data and the KPIs, I think that can really help keep you honest as a PM as well. Right, so let's just, conscious of time, moving on to our second section, growth, which I'm sure we've all experienced in some way or another. First question then is pretty broad. So how do you plan for growth? Nima, you've got the mic.
I don't know how I always end up with the mic. So, planning for growth, I think there are multiple ways you can think about it. So there's a technical way to think about it, and that's, for me, is always about the concept of evolutionary architecture. So don't build something that you spend ages on infrastructure because it's going to go big. So pretty much sticking to the 6 weeks, 4 weeks concept, but engineer it for speed of change. So how can you build something that you can easily evolve it and change it, rather than making firm architectural decisions that you cannot then change? So that's number one. And then number two is, like, be very clear in your prioritization framework of making sure that growth comes first. How do you put growth first? Is just thinking about distribution as the main way of getting growth. And for me, always a bad product with great distribution beats a really good product with bad distribution. So in your prioritization, making sure that how you're distributing your product, how you're putting it in front of partners, in front of customers, that should always come first, even higher than customer experience, higher than revenue model. And then at some point, you solve that problem, then you can focus on customer experience, then you can focus on other areas. But that's distribution piece is the key point for me when it comes to prioritization of the ideas. Anyone else?
I have really mixed feelings about this because I agree, but from what I have learned in the past 3 months in my current company Shares, we launched 4 months ago. I learned that you should expect the unexpected when it's about the growth. You think you know how you can scale, but really you don't know that you have crossed the limit until you do. And for us, this happened on a weekend when we hit the first spot in the App Store, and everything just went down. You opened the app, you could not log in, you could not sign up, and that is something we could not have predicted. So although you have to plan for it, but like sometimes it just catches you off guard, and then I think the best course of action is mitigate and jump on fire and prioritize fixing for growth so that you can enable more growth instead of focusing on prioritizing things for your current customers. But yeah, we learned it the hard way. I mean, not a bad problem to have either, right?
Absolutely. And I guess then kind of building on this question, how do you continue to scale and prioritize the growth functions, features, whatever they may be, on your roadmap while still kind of taking care of BAU, the old famous tech debt, and getting your stakeholders excited about that, because that's the kind of boring stuff, right? But you need that to enable you to grow. So yeah, how do you guys approach that?
I mean, it's always just good to have a roadmap, and the roadmap is a living document. It should always change, first of all. And when you plan, so I'm gonna just go back to this so I can jump out, is you should never think about, okay, what I'm gonna do in the next, three months. That's not good enough. You need to start thinking long term, because the features you now do as an MVP a short time, you might then have struggle with because of the architecture, especially if you have a monolith, not the microservices. And I wonder who actually went again from this migration phase in your life cycle of product people management. But anyway, what I'm trying to say is the roadmap should not be only quarterly roadmap and we go ahead, because this is when you're gonna struggle with scaling. You need to have a roadmap for 12 months. You need to have bear in mind the kind of appetite of the business, where you're heading. So always this North Star that needs to be there. And of course the scalability in terms of this technology, right? So it's what is feasible right now, because when you go and talk to your developers, you then have to take into account, and they need to start building, they need to hear your vision. Say, well, at this moment, it's a small thing, but I want this tool to be able to handle multiple cases. At the moment, for example, for us, when we introduced recording, that was very new. At the time, it was first time we reached the phase of recording. And I said to my team, I don't want this one-time recording option. There can be different situations, different scenarios. You already think ahead of this, so then it's okay. You know what? We need to be prepared for different situations. Just hope for the best, but prepare for the worst. You know what you don't know. But these even crazy scenarios, you have them. You put them on. I like to have this actually list of ideas. Quality doesn't matter if you create ideas, it's the quantity. Why? Because then you're going to come up with the most kind of things that, okay, this is realistic, but it helps you to kind of calm down the mind. And this is how you can also progress in terms of the kind of growth. But I believe that a very strong dependency is always architecture. It's going to slow you down. And stakeholders, and of course the bureaucracy, which is, I don't even go there, don't want to.
Yeah, no, I think those are great points. Is there anything else we want to add to this one? Otherwise, I'll move to the next question. Okay, so this is quite exciting. So how do you plan for international expansion? And how would you structure your org? So has anyone on the panel been through that? Going through that? Magda, take it away.
So we launch in India, guys, anytime soon. It's so Revolut was first one. Wait, how we plan? Well, I think it's always good to have. No, it's
Sorry.
okay.
That wasn't in the rehearsal.
Yeah, and it's challenging thing because Revolut was actually first one. So it was like, okay, are we going for SMEs? And it's a little bit of a battle there. But how do you do it? Well, you take the best of the best. What you've learned actually from your existing product, you need to do the research. You need to understand if you actually joining in. I always like to have also Kano model. I'm not sure. I don't want to. If you are familiar with it, but this is something that brings the satisfaction. When you just first, rather than actually, you focus on features when you do the research, because you have to do the research to understand if it actually makes sense. And you need to understand, for example, what feature you don't have, the market needs that you don't have, at your product, because the cultural differences are coming into space. You need to think if you want to actually localize, right, the website, how it's gonna be connected with your current product. For example, are you gonna have a separate platform for it, or it's gonna be supported by the same platform? So lots of architects and tech people will be involved in that. And again, scalability is a challenge, right? It's like, sorry, we cannot launch it with these features. I don't want to say more about Tide, but actually we had this big challenge, how we can scale up first and actually go and launch products in the different countries super fast. And I believe the technology allows you that to do, because we as a product, and we can step in, you have researchers, you can do the landscape analysis, and you can say, okay, this product is almost similar to the product like we have in UK, but there are differences, A, B, C, D, and then you can add them quite smoothly. But it is the platform, it is important, what you're gonna use, because this is when you're gonna be struggling when you want to build something. But of course, the cultural differences, right? The understanding of this. It's good to go and talk to people if you can as well. I always kind of recommend this. And of course, the observation. I'm happy that Revolut launched first, because I can learn from their mistakes. So don't be afraid, and I think this is where the pressure always is. Oh, we have to go, and we have to just go to this market. It's only just 9%, of the kind of a group we can actually have. But to be honest, space is large, and I like to actually have someone else making mistakes and learn from it.
Cool. I think going back to how you structure your teams, I can talk about a couple of experiences from the past and how we are doing it at Liberis at the moment. So when I was at Babylon Health, we had to release our product in around a year to 14 different Southeast Asian countries. And it's the usual localization challenge of, okay, it needs to be in a different language. Some of these countries had multiple languages, so thinking about Thailand, Malaysia. And then the next level of challenge for us was that we had to localize our AI model. So this was a symptom checker. If you were putting in the UK that I have fever, and this was 2018, so COVID was not a thing, it would have come up with, you probably have a cold. If you were in Malaysia, that was very serious. It was dengue fever. If you were in Indonesia, that was a very different story. So the challenge for us was twofold. So the language localization and then the AI model localization. And in that situation, we had to actually build local teams in each country. And these local teams, a lot of the time, the data that was needed to train these models didn't exist. So in the UK, it exists. You go to NHS, you go to NICE guidelines, you get all the data, you train your models, it's very easy. So the first step for us was to build that data set from scratch for a lot of these countries. The next step was work with regulators. The next step was to launch and test. So in terms of org structure, we ended up with one central team building the technology and many local teams trying to roll out the product in local markets, making sure that it's right, it's built in the right way, complies with regulation, so on and so forth. So a big central team, many localized teams. At Liberis now, world of fintech, I always say it's a lot easier. So now we have one central team with people speaking languages that we are launching in, not necessarily in those countries. So we are mostly launching across Europe. So the main challenge for us right now is currency conversion, is localization of the language, is translation. So therefore, one central team with customer service reps that can speak the language and might not necessarily be in the country, solve the problem. So my point here was, again, my default consultant answer. It depends. It depends on the problem. It depends on the industry, and also it heavily depends on the product that you're releasing. But you can use many different patterns to solve the problem.
So when at Babylon then, when you kind of said that, I'm kind of imagining it as a sort of tribe structure, like you had your overall tribe and there were kind of squads off the back of that who were then doing their own individual kind of workload based off where they were based in the world. How did you keep that kind of Babylon culture and that Babylon feel across the world when there's different squads and different...
So our engineering was mainly in the UK and US, so it was not that distributed. So when I talk about, so let's talk about this specific example for our symptom checker. We had the tribe that was building symptom checker. It was 4 squads within that tribe, all of them luckily based in London, co-located at the time, all in the office 5 days a week. So those teams were building the product, but the local teams were mainly teams of doctors on the ground trying to source the data. But then going to your question of like building the culture, when we were building the US office in Austin, we decided to seed it with people from UK who were part of Babylon, who knew the culture. So we moved quite a lot of people there. Those people hired the first Babylonians there, and then we continued the journey. But interestingly, after COVID, we saw that there was definitely a culture divide. So we did make a lot of mistakes, but that's a different story.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Anyone have Elina?
I definitely echo what you were saying, because I think it is a very widely adopted model to structure your teams if you are global. One thing I want to add is that also if you do it once, there is a recipe, so you can do it again, and again. So as long as you get the first one done, you're going to get the other ones done as well. But just a little bit more about how your mindset also needs to change along with it. One day you wake up and you're not just a PM, you are a global PM, or maybe you're a regional PM. So at Shares currently we're trying to expand into Europe. And now out of a sudden, instead of just thinking about UK, I need to think about, oh, is this going to work in Europe? Is this going to work in Asia? Is this going to work for crypto, stocks, ETFs? So in one day, like your scope just completely blows up. And I personally found it quite overwhelming to start with. And so I think as a PM, if you're going through expansion, you probably need to come to terms with it first, and then start to break it down and figure out a day-to-day way how are you going to deal with all these extra considerations now that you have to think about.
But is it not then part of scaling and hiring people?
Does hiring people
Well,
solve the
startup
problem?
life, huh?
Does hiring more people solve the problem? Sometimes it doesn't, right? And sometimes it doesn't speed you up, it slows you down. So, I guess.
If you overhire, then yes. But if you just actually have someone in, let's say now I hire people in India.
I cannot imagine to move this forward. I can launch it, but I'm not an expert in India. I need someone on the ground or someone who understands this market so they can drive the roadmap for India, even if this is a startup. And we can take the features from our current product, but I don't know if this is going to be relevant or not. And another thing is that I sometimes forget about, and which is very important, is the regulations, the risks, the legal part, those non-functional requirements that are just coming from nowhere. And I think this is where we need the people. And I think if you plan international expansion, it is also aligned with hiring experts as for this.
Yeah, I think the key there is that having those cross-functional teams is what you need, right?
Well, I was just going to add to, I think, your point earlier, which is you should probably look for economies of scale when you are expanding, because like Monzo is a really good example. Like we've grown really big in the UK. We actually have a very small presence in the US. And what we learned is that what makes us successful in the UK is different. So, for example, like people love to split bills here with Monzo, but in the US they use Venmo, and that's already been there for a while. And so it's a very different scene. And so what you want to look for is almost like, what is your secret sauce of Monzo, or what is your secret sauce of your company? And whether that be your people, or whether that be a skill or something you can do really well at. And then where does that fit in other countries? And is there a gap there for you? Because I think just the idea of like, let's just expand into this great country because it sounds good, but then having to rehire from the bottom up, you're building a new company all over again.
Absolutely. Yeah. Okay, so our last kind of section of questions is all around funding. So Nima, I'm going to look to you for this one as well, because I know this is kind of your forte. So I guess kind of a broad one to start us off. How should you pitch your product to get funding?
Okay, cool. So for me, it's about two key points. One is really thinking about the market sizing. So I work with a lot of early stage startups. That's something that they usually get wrong. So they do the market sizing based on an incumbent. So they don't take account for Moore's law, for technology, for the impact of their own products. It's like it is 1900 and you're trying to estimate the size of car industry by counting the number of horses. It's not going to work. You need to change your thinking. Think about how the markets are going to be influenced by technology. So that's number one. Number two is about how you paint that picture of the problem that your product is solving. And for me, it's all about a hero's journey. Hero's journey is something that we see every day in movies. So think about the movies that we watch. 80% of them are same story. So someone wakes up in an ordinary world, they see some obstacles, something happens, they overcome the obstacles, they become the hero. And then that should be the story. So the obstacles are the problem that you're solving. It is your product that is going to help our hero to solve those problems, to become the hero. And once you paint that picture, along with market sizing and hopefully a good gross margin, then it's not that hard. But I say it's not that hard. So at Babylon, I was fortunate to be part of the fundraising team for our Series C, which we raised around 500 million, but we pitched probably to 200 investors. And it was the same story over and over again. But at the end, it worked, but it was not easy. And it's not going to be easy, even with a good market, with a hero's journey. You have to pitch maybe tens, maybe hundreds of times to be able to raise funding.
I would also say that what investors are looking for will depend on the size of your startup. So whether you're a seed or whether you're round C, the requirements will be slightly different. I guess the more early days you are, the more you have to sell yourself as a founder. You have to sell the problem that we're solving. You have to sell the vision. If you're round C, then probably they're going to take a much closer look at your customers, your retention, your margins, your profitability. So I guess that's just what I wanted to add.
Yeah, that's a great point.
The time that you just become profitable is also quite important, right? Because FinTechs are in a very good position. We can earn money quite fast, right? So this is also a thing, because I know for a fact Uber had this problem a few years ago where they were so cheap, but they were not profitable enough. So I think this is where kind of the testing the patience of the all founders, right? So.
Specifically in current climate, so like 2019, 2018, it was easy to just pitch growth and MRR and ARR and no profitability. Right now, every question is about when are you going to get profitable?
I mean, yeah, we've seen quite a few fold, haven't we, in the last year? Klarna is the one that sticks to mind, isn't it? That kind of like, yeah, just have loads and loads of money on a drop down, you know, and then it's like, what were we thinking? So do you think it's early, do you think it's worth getting an early valuation?
I think it's worth getting early customer traction, more than it's worth getting valuation.
Okay. And what would you say the most important things to highlight are at each stage of your startup?
I think to Elena's point is like Series A, or pre-Series A seed, is that vision, is that hero's journey, is that market sizing. And as you go along the journey, it kind of depends on times. As we talked about it, like 2018, 2019, it was all about the rate of your growth. Are you growing quickly? Are you getting like double-digit growths every month? But right now, that matters less. More is about profitability. So not only it's about stage of your company, stage of your startup, also understanding the economy that we are in and the trends and what is important for investors. And as you go along, again, Series C, Series D, that market sizing becomes more important again, because you have grown, you can show that you have traction, you have profits, but are you going to hit a ceiling? And that becomes a key question when you're pitching Series C, Series D, and later. So you need to be able to show that, okay, so either we are hitting a ceiling, but here are the adjacent markets that we are planning for, or no, because of the dynamics, because the impact of our product on the market is becoming bigger and bigger. So therefore, the market is going to grow with us rather than us hitting the ceiling.
Is when you grow so fast and you think that you are just a big company, yet you have a mentality of the startup, or you actually you think you still call the company, but we are still a startup, which I think it's, oh no, you have enough of data, experience, and actually you've been on this market for such a long time. Stop calling yourself a startup. Now you are in a different phase. I mean, grow up. And this is for me a biggest challenge. I don't know if you guys been in this situation, but it's
yes, definitely.
It's for me a kind of those two situations I am, and I get really impatient. So.
It's like they just don't want to get rid of it, right? It's like, no, we're a startup.
Yeah,
but it's like, no, you're not.
Cool when you're starting. It's like being part of a band of pirates. You break rules, you plant your flag. It's really fun. It's really cool. And then you have to become a navy. You have to learn to execute at scale repeatedly. Defend the territories that you have, launch strategic offense on competitors. So it's a different ball games, and it's different. So for some people, it's the pirate phase that is exciting, and then they move on to other pirates. And then for some people, that is that navy phase that is exciting. And for me, like over the years, I was very excited about the pirate phase at the beginning, and now I say I'm more of a navy person. So if you've passed that point, if you want to become a navy, I can help you. I think I grew out of my pirate days.
I think that's a really nice analogy, actually. And congratulations on your captainship.
Thank you very much.
That's great news. Okay, so that's kind of all we've got for our kind of set agenda questions. So I am going to move on to Slido now, because we've got a few that have been coming our way. So yeah, don't forget you can upvote questions on Slido as well. So if there's any questions that you really want to get asked, please put a thumbs up next to them, and we'll make sure they're on the agenda. So I'll just kick off with what's at the top of the list. So another question we've got here, which I actually love because it's something that I always argue with my stakeholders about, tech debt. So who's responsible for prioritising tech debt? And how do you prioritise that against growth experiments, which ultimately sometimes accumulate tech debt?
I can start on this as well.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I can quickly give. So in my current squad, we've got a lot of tech debt because we launched a product that was read-only, and then we wanted to make it not read-only. So we're kind of starting from the back, and we had like a to-do list that we needed to do to make it usable, if you will. But obviously, having done lots of shortcuts, we incurred a lot of tech debt. And so I kind of came to a solution with my developers, because who wants to do tech debt all the time? No one. People always want to work on the fun stuff, but it's just part of life. And equally the stakeholders, who wants to know that we're prioritizing tech debt when it's not a new feature, it's not going to help us scale right now, and it's not fun, it's not fancy. So I kind of came to a nice, I did I think it was a 20% or a 15% on each sprint. So we'll say we'll do 20% of our time roughly on tech debt, so that we're not increasing it, we're kind of decreasing it, we're at least keeping it level, and the rest of it can be fun new stuff. But that's kind of how I did it, and the stakeholders seem to be okay with that.
We tried.
Yeah.
Oh, I think the mic's off.
No, do you want to take this one?
We've got one between us.
Yes,
I
cool.
think it's one out.
Yeah, we tried that approach. But like, I think it was also 15%, but then you always ended up like not doing it. So now what we do instead is we prioritize tech debt if we know it's going to block us. So if it's blocking you from doing your next thing, then you have to do tech debt first.
What about if it's a dependency from another team? I know. Oh, okay, we know how Monzo works. Yeah, what if it's from another team?
We
And
had this problem. Like,
go for it, Magda.
sorry.
So no, because Tide scaled really fast, and we don't have cross-functional teams. We do not own the end-to-end experience. So we have, for example, when I work in the card department, I actually just depend on other different teams. And how we do it, when we have planning, we already just highlighted. Our tech debt is actually, when I joined a year ago, it was 50%, and it was painful for me because it actually stopped the development. That's why features and cards now, I actually changed it. and I reduced it. But we have a must-have that is around 15 or 30% depending on actually the team at the moment, because some teams got rid of it. It's supposed to be a habit, guys. It depends as well how good your architecture is, your platform is. But I think, and I learned this hard way, that if you're gonna hit the moment when you only have to work about tech debt, or you just do a new migration, you build everything from scratch, and this is painful because it's not in 6 weeks. It's actually 6 months to 1 year, and it stops you, and you always have this legacy thing. So yes, this is a very important. It's a kind of a team. Even my team, I don't have to remind them. They always add some stuff. This is a tech debt, so I really appreciate it. So that they actually do that, and the dependencies. When we have the sessions, when, for example, I know I have dependencies already, I need to plan ahead. So we are in this planning mode ahead of time. So I am not going 2 weeks before the new quarter starts. And actually I plan not only for the quarter, I plan for 6 months already, or even longer. So then I know that I'm going to have dependencies on the teams 1 and 2 and 3. So then they add this to their OKRs, to their planning. So now we have this connection, and this is all clear. They know that they have to commit some time. This is a must-have. Planning is a crucial thing here in communication.
Yeah, I agree, and I think one thing I started doing as well is having a tech debt epic on my Jira board, which sounds really sad, but it actually helps kind of see it get done, and no one can hide behind that. Oh no, I didn't pick it up in time, or I didn't know it was in the sprint. So yeah, it's super clear, and we can see it move across the board, and it feels like even though you're accruing more every day, you're getting stuff done, right? Okay, so to Slido, there's a question here at the top, which I'm going to hand over to someone else to start with, because I'm not sure, but it says, what are expectations from PMs at the various companies on the panel? So I guess, is that kind of what is our day-to-day? What are we at our companies for? What problems are we solving, I guess? Would that answer the question? I'll hand it to Vanessa, and you go first, and I'll follow you.
I was going to answer your question, which is, what is the question about?
Okay, tell me.
Well, no, I think it's this whole, like, what does a PM do at X company, right? Because I guess everyone has a different interpretation of what a PM is. Saying that to someone else on start.
I could start. So at Dojo, we're in a really nice place, because Dojo is a kind of small, I'm going to say it, startup that wants to be a medium. It's kind of going into a medium business. So Magdalena, don't slap me. We probably shouldn't be saying that, but we feel like a startup that's kind of backed by a larger company, Paymentsense. So we're in that really nice space where we don't have to worry about raising funds, talking to investors, doing that kind of stuff, changing our roadmap based on things that other people have promised for us. So we, as a PM at Dojo, you've got loads of autonomy, and it's kind of a PM and a PO, product owner role, merged into one. We're responsible for our roadmaps, strategy of that product, bringing that to fruition, also covering off tech debt, and kind of running your squads day to day. So yeah, and communicating that back to the stakeholders, and it's a massive job, and there's always loads to be done. But yeah, I suppose at Dojo it's kind of a mix between a PO and a PM and a Scrum Master, and it's really nice though, because you get to own the whole journey, and you get to make a real impact and see it happen across the whole way, and there's a lot of ownership as well, which feels really nice as a PM. So yeah, that's kind of the Dojo world.
Cool, I can talk about Liberis. So everything you said, plus, so sense of ownership in your product area, so seeing yourself as a founder, CEO of that vertical that you're running, and then owning the experiments, the metrics, the mistakes, the successes, all of that. And then the next thing is being able to deal with ambiguity. So we are in a startup mode as well, so we have lots of change, and making sure that PMs can plan for it, can handle it, and can thrive in an environment that is constantly around them. So these two, plus everything that you said.
So in my case, it's particular case at like Tide not necessarily is built like that, but I am very understaffed, and I am. As a FYI, yes, but no, they are engineers, but. So here is the situation where I have to step into different roles, similar like Jess, where I have to be a product owner, where I have to be a product manager and think about the strategy, do the planning, do the roadmap, actually just go and catch up with stakeholders, of course, on a daily basis, and as well ensure that my team is actually moving forward. I don't have to do the literally just hands-on in the sense of writing stories, but that sometimes even happens. And long term, it is not good because I cannot focus then on strategy, right? So how can I just think about those products if I am on BAUs? So this is a challenge for everyone who goes there, especially in the first phase. That's maybe okay, but later I am a fan of cross-functional teams when there is a product owner, not a product manager, because these are two different roles, and I believe in certain circumstances they can be as one. Long term, they should be separated. But of course, again, the communication between product owner and product manager is a key, and it is almost like they have to be best friends always, because of course this kind of vision from the product strategy comes down right to product owners. So this is how it is, but not necessarily. I'm just looking at Chris how it is actually. Sorry, because we have a tight person here. Yeah, but basically, and I like this because when stakeholders ask me, I don't know if you have this as well, but when they ask me for something, I know what to do. I know at which stage of the actual development I am, but it sometimes, unfortunately, stops me from making decisions and time to think. So it's busier than usual.
That time to think piece, I think, is the eternal struggle. How do you have time to do your work when you're stuck in meetings all day and doing things, the fun stuff?
So for anyone thinking about joining Monzo, since I've done such a great job at plugging it so many times tonight, it is, I think there's a lot here that I can echo, like flat hierarchy, so a lot of responsibility, you're doing 5 roles in one. The sort of metaphors you always hear, the conductor or the captain of the ship, and you're sort of trying to get everyone to go in the same direction. That's all true. But I thought what I might try to do is actually talk about what's different at Monzo for a PM. So yes to all of that, but I think what makes, PM successful at Monzo particularly is an ability to find where you can be useful. Because I think we have actually quite a lot of people in the company that are quite autonomous. I mean, our engineers will go off and find a project that they enjoy and maybe go deliver that. So we have something called Monzo Time, happens once every month, where engineers are encouraged to sort of bring something that they enjoy working on and sort of take it end to end. So you've got people that can kind of do your job for you. And so your role then becomes what is left and where can I bring clarity, or where can I bring structure, or where can I bring, how can I make my engineer's life easier? What are their blockers? And I think that's kind of, from what I've seen, at least different to some of the other roles I've had, is different at Monzo, is where we have a lot of self-starters. And so, yes, there's the usual activities that you would get as PO or PM or the other acronyms. But what I think is helpful, what would, if you are ever thinking about joining Monzo, what would, I guess, benefit you is if you have an ability to sort of find a problem for yourself and deliver against it.
Yeah, I'm just listening and finding how it's different in every single company, right? At Shares, the expectation is that you will build up a very deep understanding of the customer, who they are, what are their pain points, what do they want, that you will use evidence in the way that you make decisions, both in data, both qualitative feedback that you learn, that you will lead forward a cross-functional team to come up with the best solution, and that you will measure the impact that you've done. I guess 3 steps.
Cool. Guys, if there's nothing else, thank you so much for your time. That's the panel.